The Snow Queen, A Tale in 7 Stories, Hans Christian Andersen. Story the first, which describes the looking glass and the fragments. Well, we will begin. When we get to the end of the story, we shall know more than we do now about a certain wicked goblin. He was one of the very worst, for he was Old Nick himself. One day he was in a very good temper, for he had made a mirror that possessed the power of making everything good and beautiful that was reflected in it shrink to almost nothing, whilst all that was worthless and bad looked still larger and worse. The most beautiful landscapes appeared like boiled spinach, and the best people looked repulsive, or stood on their heads and had no bodies. Their faces were so distorted that no one could recognize them, and if there was one freckle on anyone's face, he might be sure that it would spread all over his nose and mouth. Old Nick thought this extremely amusing. When a good, pious thought passed through anyone's mind, it was reflected in the mirror as a grin, and the devil could not help laughing at his cunning invention. Those who went to the goblin school, for he kept a school of his own, related everywhere what a miracle had taken place, and declared that now people could see for the first time how the world and mankind really looked. They carried the mirror about everywhere, till at last there was no country nor any person who had not been distorted in it. Then they even wanted to fly up to heaven with it to see the angels. But the higher they flew with the mirror, the more hideously did it grin. They could hardly hold it, but still flying upward they came nearer the angels. Then the grins of the mirror shook it so terribly that it slipped from their hands and fell to the earth, where it was shattered into millions and billions of pieces. And now it caused far more unhappiness than before, for the pieces were no larger than a grain of sand. These flew about in the world, and when they got into anyone's eyes, they would stay there, and then the people saw everything distorted. Or could they see the bad side of things? For every fragment of the mirror retained the same power that the whole mirror had possessed. Some people even got a fragment into their heart, and that was a terrible thing. The heart at once became like a lump of ice. Some fragments were so large that they were used for window panes, but it was a bad thing to look at someone's friend through such a window. Other pieces were made into spectacles, and when people put those on, it was difficult for them to see straight or to be just. The evil one laughed till his sides shook. It tickled him so. But there were still some of the small fragments floating about in the air. Well, we shall hear about them. End of Book 1.